Hey everyone, welcome back to Workshop Quick Takes. Today's episode is going to be a twofer. It's actually parts of the same job. We're doing all of our drivetrain mounts. However, the two front ones are kind of their own job, and then the third one under the transmission is a separate thing. So in the first part of this episode, we're going to get these first two done, and then we'll get around to doing the third one. Here's what happens when we shift into gear and load up the torque converter a bit. This is a worst case scenario, but it shows how much the drivetrain can move on loose mounts. The mechanical fan is not yet hitting the radiator, but that's usually what happens next. Now, this vehicle gets used a lot for off-road. Nothing crazy, but lots of bouncing. And when you're in those kinds of circumstances, it's good to control the drivetrain motion, even if doing so is a little bit at the expense of noise, vibration, and harshness in the cabin. And so we're going to use some of the bushing eye-type mounts for the fronts rather than the OE style, because the OE style are just that little bit looser. However, we're not going to use the polyurethane ones. Everyone who uses those says that they're pretty loud. We're going to use the rubber bushing eye ones. They're probably going to be a little bit louder than stock, but not quite as bad as poly.
What did we do? What did we do?
And then for the rear transmission one, there's really nothing special about that one back there, so we'll just go with a stock one. The fact that we're actually reinforcing the ones up front so that things don't move around as much means that another stock transmission mount will probably last the remaining life of the vehicle. So let's go ahead and get on that by starting under the hood. Tonight we're back on the XJ and we are doing drivetrain mounts. The ones on here, I don't know how old they are, but I can see some evidence of tenderization. And fortunately, with this inline engine layout, it's fairly easy to get to. One of them is right down here, and the other is back under here. The third mounting position, of course, is the transmission mount, which is under the transmission crossmember. We're just going to start with these two because they do need to be done. Now, we will need to support the engine from underneath before pulling either of the pin bolts out of the drivetrain mounts, and of course, for best results, do them one at a time, not both. For whatever reason, everyone recommends doing this one on this side first, so let's give it a shot. And the best way to get access to this one on this side is to simply remove the airbox. Airbox removal on this vehicle is fairly straightforward. Just need to disconnect this recirculation hose, pop these two clips, and get the snorkel tube off here. I still have the OE clip here for whatever reason, so I'm just going to loosen that. That's now loose there, and same thing over here. Pop that, pop one more over here. Those three do it. It hinges on this side, so just do that. Get the airbox cover off, remove the air filter. Still pretty clean, haven't put too many miles on this one yet. And here we go. Finish removing the airbox out of the way. There are 3 bolts down here. 2 of them are bolts on this side, and the third one is actually a nut from this side over there. And all 3 of these remove with a 13. And don't lose this bushing down here. Hopefully yours hasn't blown apart. This one over here is starting to. Once you've done that, the airbox just lifts out, and now we have a lot more access to right there. All right, let's take a quick look at the goods here before we install it. These are the rest of these mounts we ordered. Don't know what the price might be at the time you go looking for them. I think I paid $115 for the pair here. For that money, I also got these nifty stickers, which I will not be applying to my vehicle because why would I want to apply something that says steal this vehicle? I've got expensive parts in it. These here replace the OE engine mounts, which have a complete rubber piece right in here with an eye bushing from a leaf spring is what it looks like. So I'm assuming, and it would be replaceable if you had to. These do mount up exactly the same as the OE ones. There's a bolt that goes into a captive thread on the body steel that goes right there, and then this one here comes with its own bolt and washer, and that has been welded into this steel assembly here. And this here, probably a piece of DOM tube or something that's been welded onto these braces. So it looks like one piece here with 2 folds and then a second pipe piece here all welded together, powder coated. Nice. The only other thing it comes with, and I believe this is so I can adapt to a couple of this standard leaf bushing to a few different vehicles, is these spacers. These have just a very slightly reduced hole, but more importantly, by tucking in there, I assume that completes the same width as the factory assembly, so we'll have to get out there and look. This here can be done now or later. Just disconnect the hose, remove 2 self-tapping screws on the bracket with a Phillips head or a small ratchet, and out it comes. Depending on what you find in there, it may need to be emptied and washed. Okay, this next nut that we have to break down here is one of those oddball English sizes. It's too big to be an 18 and smaller than a 19. It's also slightly smaller than a 3/4, which is the nearest English socket I have on hand right now. So we'll try breaking it with a 19 and see if we can take the torque off it. Felt like it did want to turn. Might be in luck. Go ahead and put another one on this side, just to lock that side in place. Now let's see if we can turn this one using some kind of ratchet here. Looks like the ratchet wrench here might give a little more satisfaction. Oh, it's coming off, but slowly. It's supposed to be one of those prevailing torque nuts. Makes sense if it was, though, because of the location. It starts to work loose. You don't want it to just keep coming off. There we go. Okay, next let's see if we can get that one off there. Looks like that one will break with a 13. That one's going to come free, so we're good there. And we should have one more that we have to go up from underneath to loosen and find out what size that is. Okay, so this is going to be the tight one, huh? There we go. Okay, here's where things get a little fidgety, because in order to continue, I need to take some weight off the bottom of the engine here so that it's not resting on that mount anymore. I've put a piece of redwood lumber underneath the oil pan over here to act as a buffer, because I don't want to just push directly on the metal pan. That can collapse it. Or in the case of an aluminum pan, it might punch a hole through it. Just going to do this. Make sure it's not prone to slipping. I do see the engine lifting a bit, which means if everything's going well. Okay. Now I'm going to go ahead and just drop it into that catch there. That's the neat thing about this particular jack and jack stand assembly. If we have put enough upward pressure on this mount, then I should be able to start knocking the pin bolt out. Oh, sure enough. Yeah, it's nice and loose, so that means we're exactly where we want to be. Okay. Good. There's no pressure on that, so we can now finish removing the engine mount. These definitely need some anti-seize going back in. Well, actually not so terrible. Just a little sticky there in a couple spots. But yeah, there's been some moisture collecting down in there. Come back up under here and finish removing this one with a 15. Some moisture up in there too. Now this whole assembly should just come out. And there it is. This is not the most terrible one you'll see. It's definitely getting tenderized there though. Actually not bad for rust either. Seen worse. We'll wire brush that off and just hit it with a very quick spritz of rust converting spray to make sure, but there's not a lot going on there that's worrisome. Actually, that's extremely clean. There's no breakthrough of the finish at all, just a little bit around here, which we can deal with by using anti-seize compound, so cool. Okay, we got one of our mounts here. But before even dropping it down in the hole, same thing again, anti-seize. Can't really get to it effectively from the bottom side, so anything I want on the bolt I got to put on now. There it is. That's how it's going to sit in there. And that is actually a huge gap on both sides. Even with the spacers, it's a little, well, put them in, I guess. These are interference fit. I thought they were tapping in the other day. There we go, straight in. Okay, that's how you have the missing width. Oh yeah, it just fits. Okay, yeah, bolts come through the bottom, so we're good there. Looks like the old mount was actually sagged a bit. I guess we need to get the bolt started on this and then lift it from the bottom in order to slip the pin through. Just to make sure. Somewhere right in there. All right, so we're gonna secure that most of the way, but not fully cinch it. Okay, not quite tight, but almost there. Did find a slightly larger washer to use on the bottom side, along with the lock nut that was provided by the vendor. Okay, we're good. All right, let's pull that as far down into the slot as we can, see if that lines it up or not. Right now it is still a little bit. Almost snug. We need to lift the engine a little more. First off, I need a ton of compound on here because this bushing does not have a drain hole in it the way the factory one did. So, make sure you put a lot of that on there, especially here on the end because we'll use the screw threads to help drive this through most likely. Up-ish. Okay, we're close. Is that enough to get the pin bolt through? So very close. Okay, close enough. Finally got it. Enough that I can screw it in, which means, there we go. Finally. There we go. We're all the way through now. Okay, that's getting fairly tight. So, before we finish torquing it up, let's go ahead and set our other two bolts permanently. And actually, let's go ahead and take the tension off of the pan while we're at it, so that I'm not pushing down on the engine with the mount as I do that. There we go. I've definitely dropped it far to finish setting the mount, so let's go finish setting the mount, and then we'll get the rest of this pulled out. Okay, so that should be our final resting position. Tighten that up good. I'll freely admit I don't know what the torque spec is supposed to be on these, but good and tight feels good. That one should be good. Now we go to the bottom side with our 15 and finish that one. That one there was also about that tight, and it has a lock nut, so not too worried about it coming loose. So there we are from the bottom side. This here was not torqued to suspension bolt specifications when I took it off, so I probably don't need to do that either when going back on. That right there is pretty tight. The passenger side has the same mounting method, except the top flange bolt on the driver's side mount is swapped for a permanent stud over here, and the two nuts must be removed. But there are exposed 12-volt terminals in and around the work area, so first, it's recommended to take a 10mm socket and just disconnect the negative battery post. Or you can do whatever this nut is up to. I think what I'm going to try instead is just put this silicone tray over the top here and tape it down so it doesn't pop loose, and hopefully that just prevents any brief accidental contacts. The bottom side nut is difficult to get at, but with a mix of sockets and extensions, we did break it free. There we go. Man, what would you do if this one was rusty? However, after getting the pin bolt out, we got an inkling why it is recommended to change the driver's side mount first. This one's wedged in here a little tighter than the last one. See if we can just get it with a screwdriver. If not, we'll try with a pry bar. There we go. Again, same Mopar markings, made in Canada, doesn't look like it's ever been changed. It seems the drivetrain is more prone to settling backwards when the passenger side unit is removed. Having a new mount installed on the other side limits that somewhat. Same as the other side here, we have some dirt we can clean up briefly, but the surface is just dirty. Although not enough, and we had a little problem to solve. Here's our replacement mount. Just like the other side, I've upgraded the washer. It's still a grade 8 washer, but it's a little bit larger diameter. And I have also inserted these inside, but this bushing has a larger eye than the other side. There was not an interference fit, they just drop in and out. So I wrapped a little tape around them, a little Mylar plastic tape, and then jammed them in just to make sure they wouldn't be falling in and out as I try to get this in place. But otherwise, same as the other side, ready to go in. Just like on the other side, we're gonna be back to slathering everything in copper anti-seize, including this stud down here, which is going to be difficult to get to after the mount is in, so let's just coat that nice and thoroughly now. Be be a little messy, but hopefully it gets the job done. Same thing on this one. Okay, now we work this down in here just like on the other one. Gonna have to kind of fish it around these hoses. The only part that's going to cause problems is once again getting the bushings down in between. Okay, I do see one problem we're going to have is the engine is shifted backwards a bit. Yes it has. And that means we needed to run a ratchet strap around the engine side of this mount location and tie the other end somewhere forward, like the front of the frame horns or a nearby tree. The shift was maybe a ½ inch, but we still recorded nearly 30 minutes of footage where there was nothing but moving the mount around until it finally lined up. Nobody needs to sit through that montage, but that's how it's done. Okay, got a ratchet strap between my tow hook and the engine mount up there. I found a place where it actually hook on. And I think I broke the ratchet strap, but I did pull it over far enough that I was now able to tap it down in place. So let's see if we can work with this. Start by getting our nut put on down here. I think these I'm gonna have to tighten up fairly much. Well, I could have made this one a little harder to get to, but not much. Okay. Everything's shifting around, so I think that means we're going flat. All right. It's kind of looking like everything lined up after we did that, so might still need to raise the engine a little bit, but I think we're almost to the point where we can get the pin bolt through. Okay, good. Okay, break out the 18 and the 19 wrench and just go at it again. Now I just need to lower the jack. The engine is supported by the jack, and so the frame rail itself is kind of lifted off the suspension. Everything should settle back down nicely. Okay, finish lowering it very slowly. And there we go. Need to finish torquing this now that I know everything's in and lined up. Now that everything's settled, there's one more thing that's worth doing, and that's just hand rotating the fan before actually doing a test fire of the vehicle, because if for some reason these were manufactured wrong and things didn't get aligned correctly, and that fan blade collides with the radiator, this vehicle's not going anywhere, and the repairs just got a whole lot more expensive. So as long as we're down here. Okay. I still see plenty of clearance in front of the fan clutch, and the fan is spinning freely. It's not hitting the shroud or anything. So that's a pretty good sign that everything is lined back up the way it's supposed to be. Last step here, we need to get this put back in place. Yeah, there's a little nubbin right here, and it's supposed to go into a hole over the wheel well right there. There we go. I think I just ran one of my lights dead. Oh well, that's why they're rechargeable. This here probably doesn't really even need a hose clamp, but when you have a whole box full of them, you tend to find uses. So we'll go ahead and put it back on just like it was. Okay. While I had the airbox out off camera, I took the opportunity to clean up some of the wiring and retape things that had been getting loose. I've been meaning to do that for a while and just hadn't gotten around to it, and there was some stuff going on down here by the PCM that needed cleaning up also. But now we get the airbox back on the exact same way that it came off. So first off, this box drops back in. This permanently mounted welded stud there is what aligns it. And that's all there is to that. Well, those other engine mounts have been in now for a few months, and other than the little bit of additional drivetrain vibration, not too bad. It's still harsher than the OE mounts, so unless you have a specific reason for wanting these bushing eye types, you probably want to go with the OE. This meets our need. However, we don't require anything special for the rear transmission mount, which also needs to be replaced. So for that one, I have bought the OE. Everything's going on today. There's a bunch of tree trimming in the neighborhood. Anyway, this one I've chosen is Napa 620-1817. Generally like Napa for some of this kind of stuff because sometimes they're a little higher quality. In order to get this out, these 4 bolts actually face down into the lower cross member, and then notice that it has a slight tilt on it to capture the tilt of the drivetrain. So there's 2 more bolt holes in the transmission and bolts that go up through here. And then these 4 obviously are nuts. This is going to require us to be working trapped between the wheels for a while, so even though the emergency brake is set and it's in park. Next up, we got to come under here. Now in order to get it to mount, which is back up under here, the first thing we're going to have to do is remove this transfer case protective skid plate that we added. 2 nuts to remove here and 2 bolts to remove here. These are going to be a little tricky because I put them up into riv nuts, so I'm going to try and spray some PB Blaster up inside there, and hopefully that's enough to loosen them. This here's the actual mount. The rubber in there is getting pretty tenderized, so it does need to be dealt with. There's 2 bolts, one back up in here, one back up over here. And so then this piece is going to come out. In order to do that, we do have to lower the cross member, and we have to support the transmission somehow. So we're going to do that using a jack and a wood block, just like we did with the engine. This here's going to be a little bit weirder because I don't have exact access to there, but there's a hole right there and hole right there. Okay, it's been a couple minutes. Looks like that'll turn with a 15, so let's give that a shot. Okay, that's not bad at all. Those of you who live in the Salt Belt are probably screaming at your monitors right now, but I'm in Colorado. So I'm just gonna stop right there and try and loosen those up front. Okay, that's good. Okay. Okay, that was not bad. Now this is a fairly heavy piece of metal in spite of what you might look like, so I need to make sure it doesn't just drop on my face here. Before I do anything else, I now need to support the weight of the drivetrain from back here somewhere. Now, I want to make sure this piece of wood block here doesn't come much past the edge of the pan because I don't want it in my way. But I do want it there as a cushion. And I'm also trying to lift here close to the edge of the pan because it's going to be a little bit stronger there than in the middle for obvious reasons. It looks like I've run out of jack. Okay. Since we're not actually lifting the full weight of the vehicle, I'm not too worried about the wheels rotating around where they don't belong. Just gonna do that. Okay, yeah. Looking up in there, you can kind of see them. Fortunately, they don't look too rusty, but then likewise up in here. The other thing I need to spritz here is the hardware here at the ends because I'm gonna have to remove that as well, so let's just get that soaking also. $13 it is. Yeah, those came off. Okay, good. All right, in theory, I could probably just leave it hanging here like this, but I see there's a whole lot of silt and clay in it that I want to wash out, so I'm gonna go ahead and remove it completely. In the meantime, however, we now have free and clear access to our mount, so that's good. I don't know if this thing is reversible. The 2 holes I drilled for my thing there have to stay in that direction, so I just need to keep that in mind as I work with it. That's the worst of it. Now before I do anything else with this piece, I want to let it dry out pretty good so that I'm not screwing water back together. We'll get busy getting the mount swapped out and just let this sit in the sun. So you got a bolt there and a bolt there, and that takes care of that. The other thing, it might drop when we do this, I'm not sure. I think there's an exhaust hanger bolted through up here, but there's a possibility this plate will come loose. So I just need to be watching for what that does as we lower this out. Okay, that might require a breaker bar. Can't tell, but this might be a steel bolt into an aluminum casting. If it is, then it's probably galled up over time. Yep. Okay, there we go. Getting a little more like it. I think it's coming loose. It's not being friendly about it. Oh, there's Loctite on that. That actually explains a little bit. Well, there they are, old and new. New one, solid rubber molded all the way through. old one, completely torn apart, and it's been bouncing a while because it's even polished the rubber where the brake line is. So this is completely done. Broken all the way through on one side, almost all the way through on the other. Definitely not doing the job it was designed to do, and we're now going to have a nice clean replacement. Evidently these bolts were made to be Loctited. Second one, same deal. I need this leaning to the back, which it will be if I install it like this. So I'll be putting it up there more or less like that. There's one, and there's two. Okay, that's probably where it was when I got it out. Oh, that one's definitely tight. Not really going for a pro repaint, not going to clean off all the rest of the grease, just anywhere of exposed metal. I want to go ahead and add some paint back so that hopefully it doesn't rust out. These two holes I drilled for the skid plate are facing back, so it's going to go in this way. The other thing is, take a little silver anise and hit all these bolts just to make sure they don't bind up again later. As usual, nothing ever goes to plan once drivetrain mounts are disturbed, and we again found ourselves wrestling the literal 800-pound gorilla that is the 4.0, the AW4, and an attached NP231. Ratchet straps were soon involved, again. In retrospect, we might have gotten better results by attaching the cross member to the transmission mount first, with its 4 nuts lightly secured, and then using the leverage of that to wrestle it into place until the studs on the uniframe rails lined up with the holes. That amazing thought only occurred months later, specifically while we were reviewing this footage for editing. But with creative thinking and some questionable use of tools, we did finally get it in place, and everything was buttoned up with enough torque that it won't come loose again. Okay, since these are only, had a 13 on them, I don't think they want to be too much tighter than that. You can also not tell the weight's settled because you can see the stress marks forming on the surface of the rubber there. Okay, and we're done. New mount, cross member reinstalled, bolt and nut on each end, that end, bolt and nut on this end, 4 nuts underneath, and then transfer skid plate replaced. 2 here, and of course the 2 main bolts up into the transmission were done earlier, so we're all good. Okay, compare that to the footage we got a few weeks ago before ever thinking about this job. Well everyone, thanks for joining us again today. Hopefully you found that interesting and helpful. This is a little bit more advanced because you can get yourself into trouble if you don't have the right tools. As soon as you disconnect any one of those, the whole drivetrain can shift around. We're ready to go. Hopefully you've now got some ideas on maintenance that you could consider doing at home. Just make sure you do it safely so that you don't end up pinned under something. So thanks for joining us again today, and we'll see you again next time, whenever that is. Has anyone seen my phone?